We are breaking down the lawsuit from Rodney Jones against Diddy, Sean P. Diddy Combs. In our last segment, we broke down kind of the beginning of it, of exactly what's going on here, a very uh, outlined version of events. Now we're actually going to go and break down the events piece by piece, accusation after accusation. I'm going to warn you, some of this material may be disturbing. So be aware. We're going to be talking about some accusations of sexual assaults and other illegal activities. So beware. We're going to start now with line 29, the Chalice Recording Studios shooting. On or about September 12th of 2022, Mr. Combs held a writers and producers camp at Chalice Recording Studios. Present at this camp were Mr. Combs, his son Justin Combs, and Justin's friends named G. Mr. G is a 30-year-old tall African-American male. In addition to these individuals, other musicians were present at this camp. This writer has spoken to several musicians who attend the camp. One evening during the camp, Mr. Combs, J. Combs, and G were in a heated conversation. The conversation was moved out of the studio and into a restroom adjacent to where Mr. Jones was sitting. Mr. Jones was approximately 2 feet away from the bathroom when gunshots rang out. Mr. Jones recalls hearing multiple gunshots. Nothing like having this happen at Diddy's camp. Let's do a little gunplay. Mr. Jones immediately went into a state of shock and feared that he would be shot next. Mr. Jones genuinely believed that he would be shot through the door due to how close he was. After the shooting ended, a crowd gathered around the restroom. When the door finally opened, Mr. Combs and J. Combs exited. G was lying on the restroom floor in a fetal position, holding his stomach and bleeding out of his leg-hip area. Everyone stood around looking upon G. Frustrated by the lack of aid to G, Mr. Jones dropped everything, ran to G, and immediately began placing pressure on G's gunshot wound to his stomach. As he was applying pressure to his stomach, Mr. Jones realized that G was gushing blood from another area near his leg or hip. He decided to lift G and place him to sit on the toilet. Mr. Jones asked the crowd to call an ambulance. Mr. Jones lifted G and brought him to the ambulance at the studio's front. At the time, Mr. Combs and Justin disappeared to another part of the studio. Mr. Combs gave strict instructions to inform the police that he had nothing to do with the shooting. He also forced Mr. Jones to lie to the police by telling them that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant. And here in the document, we see evidence of a news story from Cal News. Man shot outside party at Hollywood recording studio. And that's how it was documented. Line 45, Mr. Jones has several corroborating witnesses who spoke with this writer anonymously due to fear of retaliation from Mr. Combs. They've agreed to speak publicly when subpoenaed. Mr. Jones, the clothing he wore the day, and believes it may still have stains and DNA of G's blood. The following are screenshots from the aftermath of the restroom where G was shot by either Mr. Combs or J. Combs. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see some of these evidence shots here. It's blood on the floor, on the toilet. It looks like a horrific scene of a shooting, because that's exactly what took place. It says clearly G was not shot outside of the studio, and Mr. Combs instructed his team to report to law enforcement. Mr. Combs and defendant LR, MR, UMG, and CRS provided private security for the writers' camp at defendant CRS. The security was porous and lackluster at best. The fact that either Mr. Combs and J. Combs were allowed to enter CRS with guns, and those guns were not confiscated by security, is a clear breach of duty by Mr. Combs. Defendants LR, MR, and UMG to protect Mr. Jones and the other attendees of the writers' camp. As a result of the shooting, Mr. Jones is severely traumatized. Mr. Jones now suffers from PTSD, severe anxiety, depression, and insomnia. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine you're going to work on a record and you've done this your entire life? This is what you do, and then this is what you're walking into, and this is just normal behavior. We're going to talk about the next section in this here as well before we break to our third segment. This next section is titled Mr. Jones was sexually harassed and assaulted by Mr. Combs. Here's what it says. Dear Casey. No, I'm kidding. Throughout his time living with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was a victim of constant unsolicited and unauthorized groping and touching of his backside by Mr. Combs. These events took place in LA, New York, Florida, and the United States Virgin Islands. In addition to the unsolicited and unauthorized touching, Mr. Jones was forced by Mr. Combs to work in Mr. Combs' bathroom as Mr. Combs walked around naked and showered in a clear glass enclosure. As a heterosexual Christian man, Mr. Jones was uncomfortable with Mr. Combs' advances and expressed his discomfort to Mr. Combs' chief of staff, Christina Coram, KK. KK responded to Mr. Jones' complaint with, Sean will be Sean. KK also attempted to downplay Mr. Combs' groping of Mr. Jones' anus and genitals as friendly horseplay, stating that those acts were Mr. Combs' way of showing that he likes you, Mr. Jones. Isn't that like what we say about like our golden retrievers, like or whatever pet you have that decides to start humping you? He likes you. Yeah, make him stop. Despite these assurances on several occasions when Mr. Combs began to undress and walk around his house naked, KK would say, "Okay, I'm leaving now," and she would disappear. KK's hypocrisy is breathtaking at best or enabling at worst. Mr. Jones believes that KK aided and abetted Mr. Combs' sexual assault of him and was working with Mr. Combs to groom him into accepting a homosexual relationship. Though these sexually deviant acts, one would say Mr. Combs has a pattern and practice of engaging in such nefarious activity, this ongoing conduct shows that Mr. Combs cannot be rehabilitated. That's where we will stop for this segment. The next one, titled Mr. Combs Attempted to Groom Mr. Jones into Engaging in Gay Sex. We'll go to that segment and take a look at some of the evidence here in this massive document that we're trying to break down for you here on True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Be sure to press subscribe so you don't miss it as we continue to break it all down. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.